The rain hammered the church steps like God's own judgment. Each drop an accusation against the boy huddled in the shadowed doorway. His small frame shaking not just from the cold but from the echo of his mother's final words. "You're not my son anymore." She'd driven him here in the dead of night to St. Mary's Episcopal in Seattle's Capitol Hill. The one place she knew preached love but whispered damnation behind closed doors. And left him there with nothing but a backpack stuffed with his comic books and a crumpled note that read, "Forgive me if you can." As the taillights of her old Chevy faded into the storm, 8-year-old Elias whispered to the empty night, "But Mama, who forgives the unforgivable?" Elias didn't cry that first night. Crying felt like surrender, and he'd already lost too much to give in. The church doors creaked open at dawn. Not by divine intervention but by the sturdy hand of Pastor Lena Hargrove, a woman whose laugh could chase thunderclouds and whose hugs smelled like fresh-baked cornbread and lavender soap. She was 52, widowed young, with skin like polished mahogany and eyes that had seen more heartbreak than a confessional booth. Lena found him curled up like a question mark, his cheeks streaked with mud and unspoken pleas. "Baby boy," she said, kneeling despite the puddle soaking her sensible flats. "This house of God don't turn away the weary. Come on in before you catch your death." Elias peeked up, expecting the fire and brimstone his mother had ranted about on the drive over, how his unnatural ways were a stain on their Baptist roots, how loving boys instead of girls made him a devil's plaything. But Lena's voice was honey over gravel. No sermons, just truth. She wrapped him in her cardigan, big enough to swallow him whole, and led him inside to the fellowship hall where coffee percolated and donuts waited like old friends. That morning, over powdered sugar and black coffee, she let him sip despite his age. Lena pieced together the shards of his story. The note helped, but it was Elias's silence that spoke loudest, the way he flinched at raised voices, how his fingers twisted the hem of his soaked t-shirt like he was wringing out his own soul. "Your mama did a hard thing," Lena said finally, her voice steady as the Puget Sound. "But hard don't mean right. And it sure as hell don't mean you're broken." She didn't pry about the why of the abandonment. Not yet. In her years at St. Mary's, she'd seen it all. Addicts dumping kids like yesterday's trash, families fleeing debts, and yes, the quiet horrors of rejection for who you loved. But a child cast out for his heart's whisper? That cut deepest. By noon, Child Protective Services had been called. But Lena worked her magic. Letters from parishioners, her own impeccable record as a foster parent. "This boy's got a home here," she told the caseworker, a harried woman named Rita who eyed the church's rainbow flag fluttering defiantly in the wind. Elias stayed. Not in the system, not in some sterile group home, but under Lena's roof, a cozy Victorian 2 blocks away, shared with her tabby cat, Mortimer, and stacks of theology books that doubled as nightstands. Life with Lena was a revelation, like stepping from black and white into technicolor. Mornings started with flapjacks and debates over the funnies, Elias devouring Spider-Man while Lena championed Wonder Woman as the real hero. Strength ain't in the webs, child. It's in the lasso of truth. Afternoons were for the church's after-school program, where Elias traded his shyness for crayons and kickball, surrounded by kids from every shade of Seattle's mosaic. Korean adoptees, Latino immigrants, white kids from the suburbs chasing rebellion. Lena ran it all with a pastor's grace and a mama bear's ferocity, teaching them not just ABCs but empathy, how to listen when words failed, how to hold space for pain without judgment. But nights were harder. Elias would wake sweating from dreams of his mother's face twisting into a stranger's, her Bible thumping against the dashboard like a heartbeat gone wrong. He'd pad down the hall to Lena's room, where she'd stir and pull him into bed without a word, her arms a fortress against the dark. "You're safe, Eli," she'd murmur, her fingers tracing lazy circles on his back. God's got a funny way of turning curses into callings. Yours is coming. Just you wait. By 12, Elias had bloomed into a lanky kid with freckles across his nose and a laugh that turned heads. School was a mixed-bag public middle school in Capitol Hill, where the halls buzzed with first crushes and whispered secrets. He felt the stirrings early, that flutter in his chest when Jamie Ruiz, the soccer captain with curly black hair and a dimpled grin, passed him notes in algebra. "Wanna grab shakes after?" Jamie scrawled one day, and Elias's heart somersaulted. They did, at Dick's Drive-In, slurping vanilla malts under the awning while the Space Needle pierced the twilight sky. It was innocent, holding hands under the table, stolen glances that promised more. But to Elias, it was everything. A world where love didn't come with asterisks. Lena knew. Of course she did. She caught them once. Jamie's bike abandoned in the driveway. The two boys sprawled on the living room rug, heads bent over a comic, shoulders brushing like it was the most natural collision. She didn't flinch. Instead, she brought out root beer floats and joined them, quizzing Jamie on his favorite villains until the boy blushed crimson. Later, tucking Elias in, she sat on the bed's edge. "Love's the purest prayer we got, Eli. Don't let anyone tell you different. Not family, not fear, not even folks waving holy books like weapons." Her words were a bomb, but they couldn't erase the scar. His mother's note, tucked in his sock drawer like a grenade pin half-pulled. High school brought storms. Seattle's rains mirrored the ones inside Elias. Fierce, unrelenting. He came out at 15, in a circle of friends at a bonfire on Golden Gardens Beach, the Salish Sea lapping at their feet like applause. They cheered, hugged him tight, but word spread like wildfire through the halls of Roosevelt High. Slurs scrawled on lockers. Fag, sinner, a shove in the cafeteria that left him sprawling. Milk carton exploding like a gut punch. And then, the call from his mother. After 7 years of radio silence, she showed up at the church gates one drizzly October afternoon. Her hair grayer, eyes hollowed by regret or resentment. Elias couldn't tell. "Eli? Baby, is that you?" Her voice cracked over the phone, arranged through a mutual cousin. Lena had fielded it first, her jaw set like granite. "You got some nerve, Marla," she'd said, but handed the receiver over when Elias nodded, steeling himself. They met at a diner off Aurora Avenue. Vinyl booths cracked like old skin, the air thick with grease and unspoken sins. Marla looked smaller than he remembered, swallowed by a faded cardigan, her hands twisting a napkin into confetti. "I was wrong," she blurted after the waitress took their orders. Coffee for her, cocoa for him, a chasm neither could bridge. "The church. They said you'd burn if I didn't let go. But I see now. You're good. Strong." Elias sipped his drink, the steam blurring her face. Part of him ached to reach across, to forgive like Lena preached. But the boy she'd left in the rain, he was still there, whispering, "Not yet." "I got a new family," he said finally, voice even. "They don't leave." Marla's eyes welled, but she nodded, slipping a photo across the table, her with a toddler, a half-sister Elias never knew. "For when you're ready." He pocketed it, the weight heavier than gold. That encounter cracked something open in Elias. He threw himself into Lena's programs, volunteering at the youth center she'd expanded into a haven for queer kids. Runaways, rejects, hearts pieced together with duct tape and dreams. "We're building arcs here," Lena joked, her office a riot of pride flags and donation flyers. Elias, now 18 and a senior, co-led groups, sharing his story in halting bursts that grew bolder with each telling. I was left for dead, he'd say. But grace picked me up. And it can pick you too. It was there, in the fluorescent hum of the center, that he met Theo. Theo Langston, 19, a transfer from a conservative suburb east of the Cascades, all sharp cheekbones and storm-gray eyes, with tattoos peeking from his hoodie sleeves, roses thorns entwined with circuit boards, a nod to his hacker dreams. Theo had been kicked out at 17 for kissing a boy at a barn dance, landing in Seattle with a duffel and a chip on his shoulder the size of Rainier. He slouched into the first support group like he owned the shadows, arms crossed, jaw set. But Elias saw through it, the flicker of vulnerability when Theo mentioned his dad's shotgun, accidentally, left on the porch as a message. After the circle, Elias cornered him in the kitchenette, pouring vending machine coffee into chipped mugs. You don't have to armor up here, you know. We're all a little bent. Theo's laugh was bitter chocolate, dark and unexpected. Easy for you to say, golden boy, Pastor Mama's pet project. But he lingered, and over weeks, the barbs softened. Late nights turned into walks along the Burke-Gilman Trail. Bikes chained to fences as they talked orbits, Elias's comics colliding with Theo's code. Theo showed him how to build a simple app, fingers flying over a laptop screen under the glow of string lights at a queer open mic. Elias read him passages from Neil Gaiman's Sandman, voices pitching high and low until laughter tangled with something warmer, unspoken. Their first kiss happened on a ferry to Bainbridge Island, the Olympic Mountains rising like promises across the water. Elias had packed a picnic, Lena's fried chicken, stolen from Sunday supper, and as the sun dipped, painting the sound in fire, Theo leaned in, hesitant as a glitch. "This okay?" he murmured, breath mingling with salt air. Elias nodded, heart hammering, and when their lips met, it was soft, searching, a key turning in a lock long rusted shut. No fireworks, just the quiet boom of belonging. Back on solid ground, they tumbled into rhythm. Theo crashed at the center some nights, Elias sneaking him into his attic room at Lena's when the pastor pretended not to notice. Mornings were lazy, tangled sheets and whispered futures. Theo applying to UW for computer science, Elias eyeing social work at the same campus. "We'll build something," Theo said one dawn, tracing Elias's collarbone. "A network for kids like us. Apps that connect safe houses. Forums that fight back." Elias grinned, pulling him closer. "ARCS 2.0, but Seattle's underbelly has teeth." Whispers started at the center, funding cuts from conservative donors sniffing around St. Mary's progressive tilt, complaints from old guard parishioners who called Lena's work recruiting. Elias brushed it off, focused on Theo's latest prototype, encrypted chat for at-risk youth. Then came the betrayal, sharp as a switchblade. It was Marla who unraveled it. She'd been calling more tentative olive branches, lunches where she'd share stories of Elias's half-sister, Lily, now 5 and just like you, curious as a cat. Elias softened, against his better judgment, even visiting her cramped apartment in Ballard, where faded crosses hung like apologies. "I want to know you again," she'd say, and he'd nod, the photo of Lily burning a hole in his wallet. Theo pulled away first, subtle at first, late nights debugging, texts gone from paragraphs to emojis. Elias chalked it up to stress, midterms looming like storm fronts. But one February evening, rain lashing the windows of the youth center, he overheard it in the back office. Theo's voice, low and urgent, on the phone. "Yeah, Marla, I got the pics. Kids leading Bible studies now? With that crowd? Your boy's gone full rainbow cult." Elias froze, Door half ajar, the world tilting. Marla, his mother, the architect of his exile, now puppeteering his present. Theo, spilling secrets like code vulnerabilities, Elias's vulnerabilities, for what? Payout? Forgiveness? The call ended, and Theo emerged, whistling, but Elias stepped into the light, voice ablade. How long? Theo's face crumpled, then hardened. She reached out months ago, said she was worried, that Lena was brainwashing you into this life. Offered help, therapy, real family. I thought I was saving you, Eli. From the echo chamber. Saving me? Elias laughed, hollow as a deleted file. You sold me out to the woman who threw me away. For what? Her absolution? Some straight boy fantasy where I'm fixed? Theo reached for him, but Elias recoiled, the center's walls closing in. Get out. Before I do something unforgivable. Theo left, tail between legs, but the damage rippled. Marla escalated, filing anonymous complaints with the diocese, allegations of indoctrination at St. Mary's, twisting Lena's sanctuary into scandal fodder. Reporters sniffed around, headlines in the stranger blurring advocacy with abuse. Donors fled, the youth center teetering on eviction. Lena fought like a lioness, rallying the congregation in a packed Sunday service, her voice thundering from the pulpit. We've built this on love, not lies. And love don't fold for whispers in the dark. Elias, gutted, retreated to the church's bell tower, the city's sprawl a glittering accusation below. Betrayal burned twin flames. Marla's ghost, Theo's knife. He texted Theo once. A single line. Was any of it real? No reply. Nights blurred into vigils. Elias poring over old comics. Heroes rising from ashes. But doubt crept. Was he doomed to repeat the cycle? Loving too fiercely, losing too soon? The climax crashed on a stormy April night, winds howling off the sound like banshees. A kid named Riley, 16 and fresh from a foster shuffle, showed up at the center's door, bruised jaw, eyes wild with fresh rejection. They said I'm next, he gasped, collapsing into Elias's arms. Behind him, headlights pierced the gale. Marla's Chevy, unmistakable, with two burly men in tow, church elders from her old Baptist fold, faces set in righteous fury. You can't have him, Marla shrieked, lunging from the car, rain plastering her hair like a crown of thorns. He's coming home where he belongs, away from this filth. The men advanced, one brandishing a court order forged on lies, the other a Bible like a club. Riley whimpered, but Elias stood firm, barricading the door, heart pounding a war drum. Lena materialized like an avenging angel, phone in hand dialing 911, her voice a clarion. This is Pastor Hargrove. We've got trespassers threatening my kids. The congregation, alerted by a frantic group text, poured in queer elders, straight allies, a rainbow tide crashing against the interlopers. Fists clenched, but no blows. Instead, voices rose in chorus, a hymn of defiance. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Marla faltered, the men retreating to their truck as sirens wailed distant. She crumpled on the steps, sobbing, I just wanted to fix it. For Lily. For me. Elias knelt, not in anger but ache, the boy and the man warring within. You can't fix what's not broken, Mama. But you can start over. He offered his hand, and after a beat, she took it, tentative, trembling. Theo arrived at dawn, soaked and shattered, having seen the melee on the local newsfeed. I was wrong, he choked, dropping to his knees in the empty fellowship hall. Marla paid me nothing, just words. I chased her ghost to outrun mine. But you, You're the code I can't debug. Elias, weary to his bones, searched those gray eyes. Forgiveness wasn't a switch. It was a server reboot, slow and glitchy. Prove it, he said finally. Help us rebuild. The aftermath was a grind, but Seattle's spirit is resilient as evergreens. The diocese cleared Lena after an investigation, exposing Marla's forgeries. Donors surged back, buoyed by viral videos of the stand, Church of Grace trending on every feed. Elias and Theo patched their fractures, not seamlessly but sincerely. Therapy sessions in Lena's sunlit parlor, late-night commits to the app now live, connecting safe havens from Tacoma to Portland. Marla entered the picture haltingly, a volunteer shift sorting donations, her hands shaking as she folded tiny pride tees. Lily came too, a whirlwind of pigtails and questions, tugging Elias's sleeve. You my big brother? Mama says you save people. He scooped her up, the weight lighter now. We all save each other, kiddo. By summer's end, Elias stood with Theo on those same church steps where it had all begun, the rainbow flag snapping in a rare blue sky. The center thrived, arcs for a dozen more Rileys. Lena, watching from the doorway, wiped a tear with her sleeve. Told you, Eli. Curses to callings. And as the fairy horn mourned distant, Elias leaned into Theo, their fingers laced like lifelines. Love, he knew now, wasn't a fairy tale or a fall. It was the daily debug, the grace in the glitch, the redemption that started with one outstretched hand. In America's fractured heart, they carved a hole.